Welcome into CBS News 24/7. I'm Elizabeth Cook. President Trump holds his high-stakes meeting with Republican House members as they race to get the so-called Big Beautiful Bill over to the Senate. Our team breaks down what happened behind closed doors and where this bill heads next. Plus, severe storms continue wreaking havoc in the Midwest. Massive tornadoes, heavy rains, and high-speed winds left a trail of destruction in states like Oklahoma, Missouri, and Kentucky. We'll take you inside the neighborhoods hit hardest by this storm. Reaction to President Trump's message on the Hill rolling in this morning. It's always rare when the president of the United States goes directly to lawmakers face to face. But Trump did just that with a message about getting what he calls the Big Beautiful Bill passed. He's telling lawmakers to, quote, stop talking and get it done. So what's in the bill that has lawmakers at odds here? Well, it continues the 2017 tax cuts, eliminates taxes and tips on overtime pay, and raises spending for defense and immigration. Now, on the chopping block, parts of Medicaid, food stamps, and clean energy subsidies. Now, keep this in mind. They leave D.C. for Memorial Day recess this week. At least that's the plan. That's why President Trump wants them to lock it in before they leave. House Speaker Mike Johnson and Majority Leader Steve Scalise had this to say after the president's visit earlier today. Take a listen.
I know we've got a few final issues to resolve, but as President Trump said today, it's time to stop the talking and we need action.
We never promised it'd be easy. We never thought this was going to be an effortless process, because when you're doing this much in a bill this large and complicated and comprehensive, there's a lot of opinions in the room. We respect that in the Republican Party. We're people of deep principle and settled philosophy, and you're going to get differences of opinion when you work through these things. That's part of it. We welcome it. Nothing in Congress is ever easy, especially when you have small margins. But we are going to land this plane and deliver this, and we're proud what we've accomplished together. Every member of the conference can be proud of this legislation in the end. President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill is going to require one big beautiful vote, and this is our shot.
Okay, so let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi live outside the White House. Olivia, the president was clearly there to put pressure on those GOP holdouts. What was his message to those still not quite on board with this bill?
Well, Liz, the president, while leaving the Capitol Hill today after urging Republicans to vote for this bill, called them fools if they don't do it. A senior White House official also told CBS News that there were a couple main clear and direct points that Trump made to these House GOP members in that meeting today. One, don't let these SALT taxes impede this bill. Get this passed and we can deal with SALT later. Those are the state and local taxes where they want to raise the threshold on them or get rid of the threshold altogether. The second was to not touch Medicaid except for in cases of waste, abuse, and fraud. That's what the president has been pursuing. And he was telling them, or telling reporters rather, that in that case he wants to get any illegal migrants off of Medicaid. That's his goal, but otherwise not to touch it. That's what he was saying there. And third, to stick together and to pass this bill and to deliver it for the American people. Those were the three main points that President Trump made to those House GOP members. This White House official went on to tell us that Trump made it clear he's losing his patience when it comes to rallying the vote for this bill. They said that he is particularly irked by the SALT Caucus Republicans and the House Freedom Caucus Republicans, both of which have differing concerns about this bill. But they said the president has been clear with them that he wants to get every Republican to vote yes on it. However, after that meeting today, we heard from several Republicans on Capitol Hill who said they're still just not there yet in passing this bill before the Memorial Day recess.
And just to check our math on this, Olivia, the Republicans can only afford to lose maybe 3 votes max?
That's about right, just about 3 votes. And not only do they have some Republicans, including Thomas Massie of Kentucky, who is just an absolute no across the board, but you have those SALT tax Republicans who want to raise that threshold, particularly ones in New York, like Mike Lawler and Elise Stefanik. But you also have House Freedom Caucus members who are opposed to raising the debt or deficit on anything at all, and anything that would contribute to that is a hard no from them. So you have about 20 that are waffling, and that's certainly more than the president wouldn't like to see.
Yeah. Now, meanwhile, House Democrats, they are a solid no on this. They argue the package is simply a giveaway to the wealthy at the expense of programs that millions of Americans rely on. So how is the president responding to that?
Well, one, on the Medicaid cuts, which I just laid out, the president says that he doesn't want Medicaid to be touched in any case except for that waste, fraud, and abuse, and removing certain people from Medicaid coverage that we had just laid out. But the president also says that this bill is essentially a tax cut for Americans. He has argued that this is the largest tax cut and rollback of regulation on the American people and American businesses, and that this would boost the economy. They're also starting to have some messaging out of this White House, particularly from the Council of Economic Advisors, that if they don't pass this bill, essentially it would be a tax hike on the American people. Yesterday, the chairman of the White House Economic Advisors Council, which is president's handpicked economic advisors, said that it would equate to a $4 trillion tax hike on the American people if they don't extend the Trump tax cuts from 2017, saying if they don't do that, then taxes will go up on the American people. So it is in everyone's best interest to pass those. That's what the messaging we've heard from the White House has been, particularly on the pushback to some Democrats.
And they're hoping to have this thing wrapped up by Thursday. How realistic is that?
Well, it is Capitol Hill. It's at any given moment they could get together and figure out how to pass it, or the president could exert enough pressure on them. But the next thing that would happen is tonight there is a committee meeting about this bill that's happening at 1 o'clock in the morning. I will not be listening to it. I will read into it tomorrow morning of what exactly happened. But it's we'll have to see from there where this goes, and I'm sure this White House will be watching that 1 a.m. meeting very, very closely. I'm sure they will. All right, CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi, I'm so glad you're going to be getting some sleep. You can wait till it comes later. I'll see you soon. Me too.
All right, now to a new book alleging aides for former President Joe Biden hid his declining health from the public. The book is called Original Sin, and it's written by journalist Jake Tapper from CNN and Alex Thompson. That book is out today. It comes just days after the announcement that Biden is battling prostate cancer. On CBS Mornings, Tapper and Thompson spoke about their interviews with hundreds of Democratic insiders and what they revealed.
I think some of the early steps were done with innocent enough reasons. You want your principal to look good. But as his diminishment increased, some of those actions became increasingly deceitful. Because the fact is that the Biden that we saw on the debate stage last June, he had other moments like that behind the scenes, and increasingly so. And they started structuring his schedule, his public schedule, to make sure that the public didn't see it. And even some people inside their own administration, their own White House, their own cabinet did not see this. They shielded him both from public view.
Okay, let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro, who is live in Wilmington, Delaware. That's where the former president lives pretty much full time now. Aaron, what's been the reaction to this book?
Jules, good afternoon. I'm about a mile away from the former president's house here in Wilmington, where CBS News has learned is where he is staying as he and his family consider treatments on his newly diagnosed prostate cancer. But we did hear from the Biden camp earlier today in response to the book, where they say, quote, there is nothing in the book that, quote, shows Joe Biden failed to do his job, as the authors have alleged, nor did they prove their allegation that there was a cover-up or conspiracy. The spokesperson for the former President Biden goes on to add that there were no specific examples where national security was threatened or where the president wasn't engaged in the important matters of the presidency. You also saw the president's granddaughter, Naomi Biden, the daughter of Hunter Biden, really discredit the book, discredit the authors, saying it relies on unnamed anonymous sources, pushing a self-serving false narrative. So that's been the main response from the Biden camp so far.
And Aaron, I'm curious, with the focus now, of course, on the president's cancer diagnosis, does this book bring into question the handling of Biden's health overall? I mean, this cancer was caught in very late stage.
Yeah, there's certainly skeptics, at least on Capitol Hill. You saw President Trump at least suggest that, the president has some of the best doctors around. Why was this not found sooner. We do know, just in terms of the timeline that we have learned, at least so far from officials with the former president, that it was last Tuesday when he first got that exam taken, and that's where they found that growth inside his prostate. By Friday, they were able to determine that not only was it cancerous, but it was a, quote, highly aggressive form of cancer that they say can be responsive to certain hormone treatments. But this question, not just about the former president's health, but about how his aides and team have shielded the public from the full details about it, has been brewing, certainly in the past couple of weeks. You saw that even last Friday with the release of the audio of the interviews between President Biden and Special Counsel Robert Hur, who was looking into Biden's holding of classified documents. And you saw and heard in that audio many moments where the former president was forgetful, didn't know certain years when his son Beau had died, when President Trump was elected. So certainly it's been a growing narrative. This latest diagnosis is the latest chapter in that.
And I'm wondering, could the allegations made in this book ultimately have an impact on Biden's legacy?
Certainly. I mean, I remember when I was covering the former president's campaign, I was covering the tail end of it. And I was with him in Las Vegas, and I remember that last event was canceled because of a COVID diagnosis, someone any age person can get. But it was a reminder that health has really defined the last couple years of President Biden's term in office, as well as his post-presidency legacy. Questions about whether he should have ran for re-election, whether, as this book has talked about, his team didn't release the full details about his health. So certainly, at least in his time in the White House towards the end and post leaving it, his health has really been a key storyline in addition to what he was able to accomplish during his actual term in the White House.
Aaron Navarro, live for us in Wilmington, Delaware. Thanks so much, Aaron. All right, let's jump the map now to Oklahoma, where residents begin recovering from the severe storms that slammed parts of the Midwest yesterday. The National Weather Service recorded winds of up to 60 miles per hour during the peak of this storm system. Now, these are just some of the reported tornadoes caught on camera in Oklahoma. Those tornadoes also brought hail the size of baseballs. Luckily, most of the damage left behind was not life-threatening. Wow, you don't see that every day. A parked police cruiser near Oklahoma City struck by lightning. CBS News senior weather correspondent Rob Marciano shows us what the damage looks like on the ground in the southeastern part of that state.
The second day of this huge system slamming the central U.S. brought over 450 damaging storm reports. We're in Pittsburgh County, which got hit with a tornado. This is the town of Blanco that the eastern edge got hit with a tornado. You can see what it did to this piece of property. A lot of trees down. There's a tree in that home. There's a tree that's blocking the access road to this subdivision. There are power lines that are down all over the place, and they've done a fairly good job of clearing some of the roads, but a lot of the roads, as we've driven around this morning, have been impassable and very dangerous to drive around, and a lot of power out throughout this area. National Weather Service will come out and survey the damage here and see just how big a tornado it was, how strong it was, and for how long it was on the ground. 6 reported so far yesterday, and today's going to be day 3 as this system pushes to the east. So places like Memphis, Tennessee, Tupelo, Mississippi, Huntsville, Alabama, Nashville, Tennessee, Knoxville, even Atlanta, Georgia, and unfortunately for much of the state of Kentucky, they're going to see more in the way of damaging storms as they recover from the tornadoes that hit them very hard on Friday. Back to you.
Rob Marciano, thanks so much. Now, people in Kentucky now turning to FEMA, which has been weakened in the past couple of months, to help them recover from Friday's deadly tornado. CBS News learned the agency lost about a third of its staff, 1,800, taking President Trump's buyout offer. Now, according to a top former official there, another 200 or so probationary workers were fired. Now, it comes as the state prepares for another round of storms today. Take a look at this in Louisville right now. And I want to bring in Jess. Jess, give us kind of a scope of where the timing of these storms. I mean, they just continue to batter this area relentlessly.
Exactly. And we've seen record amounts of rain in Kentucky on top of the tornadoes that we've been experiencing, and we're not done with that weather just yet. Throughout the next 24 hours, we'll watch some stronger storms push throughout the exact same regions. The Tennessee Valley up into the Ohio Valley, that's some of our biggest concerns right now in those low valley areas. But before we get to the forecast, let's bring in CBS News correspondent Nicole Valdez, currently in Nashville, Tennessee right now. We've been with you all morning, where some rough weather there is only getting worse. What are you seeing out there right now?
Just a bit of a break right now, and the sun is out. That is really a roller coaster of a morning we've had, but we know that this area is on tap to see some of that bad weather later on this afternoon and evening. So high alert still here for all the damaging really threats that you just mentioned. Hail, strong winds, and tornadoes, they are all possible throughout parts of this state and the state of Kentucky, who you just heard earlier from Governor Andy Beshear, who's talked about the devastation there and the lengthy recovery still ongoing there, preparing people who are living and still in those tornado damaged areas to get out by tonight, to not be there, because all that debris could be a major hazard for those who are here. Let me give you a glimpse of downtown Nashville right now. I mean, it looks like business as usual, like there wasn't just another downpour here 20 minutes or so ago. But there are a lot of things going on in Nashville tonight that have people a little bit on edge. One of them being a massive concert over at Nissan Stadium. That is an open air stadium. There are concert goers who have walked around all here today telling us it still has not been canceled. So they're planning on attending, rain or shine. It will definitely be an interesting situation to see whether or not the stadium decides that the weather may be too dangerous to move forward with that concert. But overall, you want to make sure you've got your phone alerts on and you're just paying attention to the skies, recognizing that this is not a situation to take lightly. I mean, just take a look at what's happened over the last 3 days as an example and proof of how serious and intense these storms can be, Jess.
You're exactly right, and we're not clear just yet. You're mentioning that you're seeing a break right now, but some stronger storms are to come in that exact same region. Nicole, thank you so much, and let's actually dive over into the forecast for Nashville and for the rest of that area, because within the next 48 hours, we'll watch, especially in the afternoon hours, as there's a lot of instability in the atmosphere. Some of these storms start to gain strength, and they move quick. We could see damaging winds, tornado activity once again throughout Tennessee, stretched up into Kentucky. And based off the timing, it's not only large events like that concert that she's mentioning, but this is also just an inconvenience getting home from work and school throughout many of these areas. And then as that storm continues to track off into the east, it pushes into the overnight hours tonight, which could also pose threat when it comes to damaging winds and all that debris that's just left out there on the ground from earlier this week from that storm. That could potentially be a big issue, too, for local communities. Now, our severe weather threat, and when we take a look at the storm track, here's what we're gearing up for. Chicago and Cincinnati right now dealing with some of the most active weather, while we are seeing a little bit of a breakdown into Tennessee and all the way up into Kentucky. The state's kind of split in half currently. Watch what happens as we advance the clock. This storm cell right here, that advanced storm cell that's pushing across the Mississippi, that's what I'm concerned about as it makes its way over Tennessee into the overnight hours tonight. It breaks apart into the early morning hours on Wednesday as it tracks up to the northeast, regaining some strength into the afternoon hours on Wednesday before it pushes offshore. But that means that on Wednesday, places like D.C. and New York are going to be dealing with soggy conditions. But for now, we take a look at what we're dealing with today. That severe weather outlook takes the whole state of Tennessee, northern portions of Mississippi and Alabama, and throughout most of Kentucky, where lots of the damage has already happened this week. We're continuing to see more of a chance of tornado threat today, on top of that large hail with the thunderstorms and damaging winds, too. We'll keep a close eye on this. We turn our page to our forecast tomorrow. It's looking a lot more promising for these areas, but for the time being, we still need to gear up, be prepared. And like Nicole said, too, have your phone alerts ready to go. You don't know where you're going to be at when some of these stronger storms are pushing through.
So they just have to get through the day, and they're going to get a little bit of a break.
Relief tomorrow, just in time for recovery, yeah.
Good. Thank you, Jess.
Of course.
Well, coming up after the break, we have the latest from the sex trafficking trial against former music mogul Sean P. Diddy Combs. We have a recap of the testimony so far, including more details about the alleged abuse against Cassie Ventura. You're watching CBS News 24/7. We are following developing news in New Orleans, where a maintenance worker has been arrested and accused of helping 10 inmates escape a New Orleans jail. The affidavit said the worker was threatened by an inmate. 4 of the men have been captured, but 6 are still out there. The inmates escaped through a hole behind a toilet. And get this, above that hole, they left a message mocking their captors with a misspelled, quote, "too easy." Here's CBS News' Katie Weiss.
Well, a lot of development so far. Not only has a fourth escaped inmate been arrested, but also an arrest has been made against an employee at the correctional facility. A maintenance worker has been arrested for his alleged connection in the case. Authorities say that 33-year-old Sterling Williams helped the inmates make their daring escape by turning off the water supply to the facility so that way the inmates could more easily remove the toilet from the wall without getting drenched in water while they were doing so. And Sterling Williams is actually charged with principal to simple escape and also malfeasance in office. Those are the two official charges that this person is facing now for his alleged involvement. We're also working to learn more. Did this person potentially supply power tools to assist? We know that 3 total employees at the jail have been put on suspension, so we're still trying to get some answers as to, what other people may have also helped these inmates in this brazen escape, because not only did they escape in the middle of the night and remain undetected for several hours before jail employees knew that they were gone, but they also, were pretty brazen about it, writing, taunting messages on the walls to jail employees saying things like "too easy," LOL. And so it's something that these prisoners really wanted to kind of make fun and poke fun at how lax security measures may have been at the facility. Now, coming up, the city is actually meeting to discuss some of the potential security issues and what budget problems may have led to those security failures. We're going to continue to follow this. We know that so far a $20,000 cash reward has been offered for any information that can lead to an arrest of the remaining 6 inmates who are still at large and considered armed and dangerous. We know that officials are searching high and low for them. There's about 200 officers assigned to that search. So potentially a lot more information coming out pretty soon. We'll keep you posted as soon as we know more. We'll send it back to you.
Katie, thank you so much. Now jumping the map to New Jersey, where another air traffic control outage hit Newark Liberty Airport yesterday. This marks the 4th system outage in less than a month at the Air Traffic Control Center near Philadelphia that handles flights in and out of Newark. The disruption prompted controllers to warn pilots they may not be able to communicate. Take a listen to this.
Just be advised, we may be having a frequency outage. United 2295. Go ahead, 2295. It may be a while. They lost the radar and frequencies again.
Now, the FAA says it lasted just 2 seconds, but a source tells CBS News it took about a minute for things to fully come back online. The agency also says all flights in the air stayed a safe distance apart. Aircraft traffic at Newark has been slowed down by limiting the number of flights allowed per hour. And we have new details on the deadly crash of a Mexican naval ship into the Brooklyn Bridge. Investigators believe whatever went wrong happened within the first 5 minutes of the boat leaving its pier. The tugboat assisting the ship radioed for help less than a minute before impact. Now, the NTSB says it's still waiting for permission from Mexican authorities to get on board that naval ship. Officials for the agency will investigate whether this was a mechanical or an engine failure. And we are continuing to follow an incident that played out at Buffalo Airport in New York. The car you see there intentionally drove through a fence and ended up on the runway of that airport earlier today. The driver is now in custody. Airport operation was not impacted and no flights were delayed. And staying close to New York, a former personal assistant to Sean Diddy Combs took the stand today in the sex trafficking and racketeering trial of the Bad Boy Records founder. Now, so far, we've seen witnesses testifying that they've seen firsthand the abuse and control that Combs inflicted on his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, and others. Let's bring in CBS News legal contributor Caroline Polisi for more on this case. Caroline, okay, let's start with today. What were the latest details that were revealed in court?
Yeah, we're seeing witnesses come rapid fire today. We've already heard from 3 witnesses. You've mentioned they're the personal assistant, but also we heard from Cassie Ventura's mother, Regina Ventura, which I think was really important here. She corroborated almost exactly to a T the testimony that Cassie gave regarding Sean Combs's potential and threat to release 2 sex tapes, one on Christmas Day. She also corroborated that she had actually taken pictures and photographs of Cassie's abuse. So that goes a really long way in terms of corroborating and bolstering Cassie's testimony. These are contemporaneous reports to her mother about what had happened. That's really powerful evidence, so much so that the defense didn't even attempt to cross-examine her. She's a delicate witness, and so they didn't even want to go there. But also beyond the corroboration, we're really seeing the government get more into this case of the racketeering conspiracy, right? They need to prove more than just the alleged abuse. We're getting into issues of bribery, coercion, obstruction of justice, things of that nature. The personal assistant testified about several incidents, one of which was this late night encounter with Suge Knight in which guns were involved, prompting him essentially to quit because he felt his life was in danger. Also, a number of issues of violence, including one in which Sean Combs told him to report to the police that it was not Sean Combs that had started a fight with his personal chef, that she had started it first. So that sounds a lot like obstruction of justice. So we're starting to add these new elements into the case.
You know, one of the key pieces of evidence that was revealed last week, but they took several days to do it, were those text messages between Sean Combs and Cassie. And they spent so much time on it. I want to ask you about it, and if you feel like the revealing of those text messages benefited either side, one way or the other.
Yeah, it did. And certainly the defense can do a lot with those text messages because it does show, in one sense, a side of a voluntary nature of this relationship. You know, she indicated that she wanted to participate in the freak-offs, indicated that she loved him. But, you know, that makes her testimony all that more credible. She did not deny on the stand during her direct examination in her vocal testimony. She did not deny loving Sean Combs at a point, being fearful that he would leave her, all things that, you know, are typical in a relationship that does potentially contain abuse. So these text messages, not wonderful for the prosecution, but again, I think can easily be dealt with by perhaps an expert witness on the part of the prosecution, things of that nature. And again, I will just note, we have more to come here. This is a sex trafficking and RICO federal case. This is not a state domestic violence or assault case.
All right. CBS News legal contributor Caroline Polisi, thank you so much. Always great to see you.
Thank you.
Well, we have our eyes on Capitol Hill as lawmakers reconvene after meeting with President Trump in person on his so-called Big Beautiful Bill. We'll have more on that meeting, how it played out, and what's ahead for Republicans who are the last holdouts. Let's cover that right after the break. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Well, a number of cabinet secretaries spent the morning on Capitol Hill today talking budgets in their respective agencies, including Kristi Noem, RFK Jr., and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Now, while his cabinet members testified, President Trump himself made a rare appearance on Capitol Hill to push for the passage of this bill that he hopes will fund the realization of his campaign promises. Now, to get the job done, he needs money from Congress. And Trump's agenda includes tax cuts and increased spending on military and immigration enforcement, and cuts to Medicaid, food stamps, and clean energy subsidies.
I think we have unbelievable unity. I think we're going to get everything we want, and I think we're going to have a great victory, and this man has done a great job, and I think this was a tremendous session. You may want to say something.
Yeah, it was a great meeting. The party is unified. The House Republican Conference is excited. Multiple standing ovations. They love this president. The people back home love what he's doing. It's historic, and everybody understands the scope and the meaning of this. If we do not accomplish this mission, every one of you, all the American people, are going to have the highest tax increase that you've ever had.
All right, but there's been some conflicting thoughts on that meeting. Here's what House Freedom Caucus Chair Andy Harris had to say after the meeting.
The president, I don't think, convinced enough people that the bill is adequate the way it is. Look, the president called for eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicaid, and we have not eliminated waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicaid in this bill.
Okay, let's get right to CBS News congressional reporter Torian Small, who's live on Capitol Hill for us. Torian, what more are we hearing about this meeting?
Yeah, Liz, like you just pointed out there, it's clear that the Republican conference at large and the president aren't necessarily on the same page. Representative Harris there is a part of the House Freedom Caucus. Undeniably, there are other members within that caucus who are uneasy with this proposal as it stands. But there are other members that agree with the president, like Representative Lauren Boebert of Colorado, who came out of the meeting, said she is firmly behind Donald Trump and wants to see this cross the finish line sooner than later. The question, though, is how will this get done? Will there be concessions made, and will people see eye to eye by the time it gets to the full floor for a vote, which could be as early as Thursday? There are still some underlying issues for members of the Freedom Caucus, like timelines on work requirements and elimination of those tax credits in order for them to get behind it. And then you have some moderate Republicans who are looking at issues like whether or not cutting these safety net programs like Medicaid could directly impact their constituents, Liz.
Yeah, I mean, because these people, you have to remember, these GOP lawmakers are getting pressure not only from the president, but also, the people in their districts, the constituents. They've been going to these very volatile town hall meetings for the past couple of months. Who else, or who are we talking about here? Who else does the president still need to convince to go yes on this big, beautiful bill?
Well, there are some Republicans who are normally in line with the president's agenda, but have some reservations about this proposed SALT cap. That's state and local tax, federal deductions for state and local taxes. And ultimately, what they're arguing is that the $30,000 cap proposal that Republican leaders have put forward just isn't enough. The problem with that, though, is it doesn't appear that President Trump is standing with them as it relates to any increases to this SALT cap. The president, according to sources who told CBS about that meeting, said that he doesn't want to see any of that bog down the progress of this bill. And coming out of it, again, Congresswoman Boebert said that the president said he didn't care too much about that. He doesn't want to hear much about it, no grandstanding, and wants this to move forward. That is still a significant portion of the Republican conference. And with this very slim majority that Speaker Johnson has, if he loses more than 3, this bill is essentially dead.
Okay, let's talk about some of the hearings on Capitol Hill going on as well today, raising some eyebrows. I'm talking about testimony from Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. What have we heard so far coming out of that?
Yeah, so the biggest headline has obviously been the grilling, the very intense grilling from Democrats on that panel to her about the legality of Trump's mass deportation plan. In fact, quite a few Democrats pressed her on if she knew the definition of habeas corpus. Now, Kristi Noem said in response to that it was the president's right to deport who he wants to ask if they're here illegally to leave the country. The actual definition, the constitutional definition of that is the right for anyone who is detained to have their day in court, essentially. She was also, and this was an interesting action I thought to note, she was also pressed by Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri, who was a Republican, by the way, about the efficacy of FEMA under her leadership. He was concerned that constituents in St. Louis, after a raft of storms, haven't received adequate attention from the agency. She pushed back, saying that she, under her leadership, will ensure that they get, and other communities impacted by these natural disasters, the need and resources that are appropriate. But this also comes at a time where she's significantly looking to limit FEMA, and also after the department has been gutted of personnel, Liz.
Yeah, it's interesting that this conversation is happening now, while in the Midwest and the South, they've been dealing with storm after storm that have just been devastated on so many of the communities there. All right, Torian Small live for us on Capitol Hill. Thanks so much, Torian. Well, coming up, Pope Leo has been accused of covering up sexual assault accusations against priests just weeks after being voted to lead the Catholic Church. We'll have more on that after the break. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Well, a group known for protecting victims sexually abused by Catholic priests unveiled documents today from a whistleblower. And in those documents, cover-up allegations by newly elected Pope Leo XIV. Let's bring in CBS News correspondent Chanel Call, who is following the story from us from our newsroom. Chanel, what are the accusations here?
Well, so this is coming to us this afternoon from SNAP, the survivors network of those abused by priests. They held a news conference in downtown Chicago just moments ago. And look, Liz, the group says it has new whistleblower documents that apparently accuse Pope Leo XIV of mishandling abuse allegations during his time as bishop in Peru. The group says there is now some mounting evidence to support that bombshell claim. And they also claim that the Pope misrepresented abusers' actions to the public during his time in Peru. Here's Peter Eiley, one of the founders of SNAP.
What occupation in civil society allows, especially those working with children and families, allows a person who in the course of their occupation has raped and sexually assaulted children to continue to practice, to have their license basically, and to continue to have access to children? Unfortunately and sadly, as we'll talk about today, the evidence shows, the mounting evidence shows, that is exactly what Prevost did. We're going to be looking at 3 periods of his long ecclesiastical career. This is the underground story of Prevost. This is the side of him and his management and his decisions that we're finally being able to bring to light.
And so, Liz, SNAP basically today outlined 3 periods that is in Pope Leo's career where he was allegedly in charge of priests who've been accused of sexually assaulting children. Those 3 periods include time spent in Chicago, in Peru, and the Vatican. SNAP, by the way, just as a bit of background here, is a group that's known for protecting those who've been sexually abused by Catholic priests. And I also want to mention that 6 weeks before American Cardinal Robert Prevost became Pope Leo XIV, SNAP actually also filed a complaint against him, along with other church leaders, directly to the Vatican Secretary of State. I've just been looking now as well to see if the Vatican has responded. It doesn't appear as though they've directly responded to these recent claims.
All right, Chanel Call, thank you so much for keeping an eye on this story for us. All right, let's turn our monitors to Minnesota as firefighters continue battling 2 of the 3 wildfires that broke out over a week ago. The National Weather Service issued a fire weather watch through this evening for those areas still facing the threat of flames. That's because wind gusts are expected to reach up to 40 miles per hour. And it was a similar scene playing out in Arizona as firefighters there battled the Greer fire. Those flames burned over 20,000 acres. Crews did manage to contain enough of that fire to lift evacuation orders, at least for now. So let's take a live look at Phoenix right now. High temperatures expected to hit Arizona all the way to California tomorrow. Red flag warnings have already been issued for fire danger. Let's bring in Jessica Birch with more of what we can expect. I mean, this seems early for the summer for it to be this hot and this kind of fire danger.
Exactly. Well, you also have to keep in count when it comes to red flag warnings, there's a couple key ingredients. High temperatures, strong winds like we just mentioned, especially up north, but to add to that, low relative humidity. And down in the desert, I mean, they're used to that. But yeah, it feels like it's summer already and it's warm and we're continuing to warm up. So while we're dealing with rain off into the east, we're dealing with a completely different picture off to the west. I'm going to dive into that right now and I'm going to pull up our temperatures just to kind of paint the picture for what we're dealing with today. By tomorrow, it's going to look a lot different, and I'll show you that in a bit, too. But, I mean, we're talking about Vegas and Phoenix already in the 90s, eventually seeing triple digits around the corner. It's going to heat up a lot down to the south, and we take a look at that temperature contour map. Right now, you're seeing that heat slowly build its way just to the north, closer to those communities that are already dealing with dry conditions, which could be critical with fire weather conditions if those winds start to kick up. So let's change gears real fast and talk a little bit more about these temperatures, because often to the northeast, when they're dealing with all these storms pushing through, they're actually sitting below average, but it's a lot different down to the southwest. Areas like Vegas down into Phoenix today already above average, and we're going to continue to warm up into our forecast tomorrow. It's going to be a warm setup for us into the Thursday forecast and Friday as we get closer to the weekend. This also includes Texas too, well above average for this time of year. But then you take a look at the next 6 to 8 days and even past that as we wrap up the month of May. Temperatures become a little bit more mild over into New Mexico, a little bit of Arizona, and we're actually going to continue to see that nice cool down up into the Northeast, where right now they're also dealing with some really active weather in areas like Tennessee and Kentucky. I'll have more on that coming up in a bit, but for now it's been a very active weather season so far, off into the Northeast and of course across the Midwest. And it's very hot. It's very dry for our friends down into the Southwest.
Yeah, just the tornado warnings have just been overwhelming. Every week there's several that we have to worry about.
It's been a very active season.
All right, Jess, thanks so much. Well, coming up, it's Take Your Kid to Work Day at the White House. How fun is that? We have a surprise from inside the press briefing room where Caroline Levitt held a mock briefing for the little ones. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Today was a very special day. The East Garden of the White House served as the backdrop for little arts and crafts on the agenda today. That's because the Trump administration hosted a Take Your Children to Work Day event. The First Lady sat down with a group of kids to paint some wooden flags before complimenting them on their work. And over in the White House briefing room, the press briefing room, Caroline Levitt's questions sounded a little different today. Kids from the White House press corps got a chance to ask their own questions instead today. So let's bring in CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang, who was in the room with her daughter Frankie, and there she is. Frankie and Weijia, what was that experience like?
What was that like, Frankie?
It was like I was sliding down the biggest slide in the whole wide world.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, I can imagine. It feels like that for me too almost every day. Did you have butterflies? Were you worried about what were you going to ask her?
Did you have butterflies in your tummy because you were a little nervous?
Well, how about this? What did you ask her? What question did you ask Miss Levitt?
What was Donald Trump's favorite food?
His favorite food? And what did he say?
Steak.
Steak. Okay. Actually, I think we have a clip of you actually asking that question like a pro. Can we play some of that?
What is President Trump's favorite food? Well, President Trump loves a lot of different foods, but I think his favorite is probably steak. I've had steak with him on many occasions, and he likes to eat a big, beautiful steak.
Great question, Frankie. Clearly you got that from your mama. And what else did you get to do today?
What else did you get to do?
I got to eat 2 chocolates.
Oh, yes. A very special day.
The White House gave us some chocolate, right?
Yes.
I love it. And this, and Weijia and Frankie, this isn't your first time to the White House, right? You've been there before.
Yeah.
Yes?
What did
you can give tours now?
We've been here before.
Trick or treat and 2 Easter egg hunts.
Oh. Well, my next question is for your mama. Weijia, I know how hard you work and the long hours you put in and all the travel that goes into doing your job. It must mean so much to get to have a day to share this with your daughter. That's just got to be priceless.
It is. It's so special to have Frankie here. So now she knows what Mama's doing when I go off to work. But you know what Mama's #1 favorite job is being mommy. So it's special to be doing both at the same time.
Oh, that is amazing. And Frankie, you've got a little brother. Do you think he's going to be brave enough one day to come and ask those questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you're going to teach him how to do all that.
Yeah.
Oh, what a special day. I'm so glad you got to come on our show. Lucky us. This was the highlight of my week. So good to meet you, Frankie and Ouija, as always. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. I hope you guys get to celebrate today together.
Thank you. Hi, Daddy.
Bye. Hi, Daddy. Bye, Ouija. Oh, were they so cute. All right, our monitors continue to follow all the President Trump's movements today. We'll have much more on that when Lindsay Reiser takes over next, right here on CBS News 24/7.